questions, I encourage you to just type your question in the chat, and when we open up for Q&A, your questions will be provided to me, and I'll try to answer as best as possible. Okay, so yeah, if we can go to the next slide. The Republic of Rwanda is a small landlocked nation in Eastern Africa. It's known for its green mountainous landscape, and it's earned the nickname Land of 8,000 Hills. Its renowned Volcanoes National Park is home to the mountain gorillas and golden monkeys. No, we didn't see any gorillas. No, we didn't see any monkeys. And you'll understand a little bit more as we go through the presentation tonight. Rwanda is considered to be among the smallest countries on the continent. Rwanda's total area is estimated to be about 26,338 kilometers. It's comparatively about the size of the state of Maryland. So you actually can drive in any direction in the country in one single day. That's how compact the country is. If we go to the next slide, I've provided you some facts about Rwanda. Rwanda is located in East Africa, and it's bordered by 4 countries. Tanzania, which a lot of people in the Western Hemisphere say Tanzania, but the appropriate pronunciation is Tanzania. There's Burundi, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Uganda. Rwanda is infamously known as the scene of the 1994 genocide, during which more than 1 million Tutsis and moderate Hutus ethnic groups were massacred. An estimated 2 million people actually fled the country during the period of the genocide. It was by the leadership of General Paul Kagame that put an end to that bloodbath. He won control over the country in July of 1994, and since 2000, Paul Kagame has won 3 elected terms and is currently still the president of the Republic of Rwanda. Again, most people are familiar with Rwanda because of the genocide and what took place during that time period. If we go to the next slide, the new leadership of Rwanda that's in place now, of course, inherited a country that was on the decline. There was really no infrastructure. People were impoverished and wounded. And think about it, a genocide, you have a population of people that are traumatized. However, Rwanda has made tremendous progress in many areas of social welfare. In fact, it's noted globally and serves as a continental example of fast economic growth with successful post-war construction. Since 1996, Rwanda has experienced a steady economic recovery. The word that you see on this screen is, oh, I'm sorry, could you change the slide, please? Yes. So the word that you see on the screen now is kiwabuka. Kiwabuka means to remember. And this is the memory, the commemorative memory of the genocide that took place. And so the celebration or the memory of this time, commemorating this time, begins on April the 7th, and it concludes on July the 4th, which is Liberation Day, which is the period of time that the genocide took place. The 29 represents the number of years since the genocide. So next year, it'll change to 30. And during this time period, it is a time purposely set aside to remember. If we go to the next slide, I'm sure you have questions about the climate in Rwanda. I noticed when I returned and I shared with people that I'd been in Rwanda, the first thing many people would say was, I'm sure you were really hot. It's really hot in Africa. There are a significant amount of stereotypes and preconceived ideas and notions that exist about various places in the world. The temperatures vary considerably between locations depending on their altitude, but very little from month to month in the same place. In the capital, the average daily temperature is about 21 degrees Celsius, which is about 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The average year-round temperature is about 12 degrees Celsius, which is about 54 degrees Fahrenheit, up to about 27 degrees Celsius, which is 81 degrees Fahrenheit. So the gist of it is the weather was very nice. It was actually very nice weather, extremely comfortable. It wasn't really hot. And of course, as you can see, we were there during the dry season. So there wasn't any rain that happened while we were on site. If we go to the next slide, this slide is a representation of the economy in Rwanda. Rwanda is increasingly experiencing the predominance of the service sector as it gains importance relevancy to agriculture over the recent years. The country has experienced a 10.9% real GDP growth from 2020 to 2021. So when we think about 29 years ago, having experienced the genocide, and 29 years later, you see this significant economic growth, it's another indicator or representation of how well the how well the country is resurrecting from the experiences that they had a period of time ago. If we go to the next slide, you'll see here 3 major exports within the country. Coffee is the main export that contributes to the revenue, and it makes up a quarter of the total export value, while the mountain-grown tea is considered to be one of the finest in the world. Now, I like coffee. I didn't drink Rwandan coffee. It's a little too strong for me. But for those persons that were traveling with us that enjoy coffee, they seem to really like it. And so for those of you that are coffee lovers, I would encourage you to look at places with fair trade. You might be able to find some Rwandan coffee here in the States, of course, since it's exported from Rwanda, and you can have a chance to partake in it as well. If we go to the next slide, this gives you some information about World Vision. Now, let me start by saying I am not an employee of World Vision. I'm going to share information with you about World Vision, but I'm not a representative of World Vision. We do have World Vision partners that we can connect with if we have additional questions or want to get more visibility into the company. I'm going to encourage you to also consider visiting their website because there's a significant amount of information you can obtain from the website as well. World Vision was founded in 1950. They believe that every child deserves the opportunity to realize their full God-given potential. They pursue their mission through integrated and holistic commitments to transformational development that is community-based and sustainable. It's focused especially on the needs of children. They also focus on emergency relief that assists people afflicted by conflict or disaster, promotion of justice that seeks to change unjust structures affecting the poor among whom they work with, partnerships with churches to contribute to spiritual and social transformation, public awareness that leads to informed understanding of giving, involvement, and prayer, and a witness to Jesus Christ's life through deed, word, and a sign that encourages people to respond to the gospel. They're very focused on encouraging people to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. This is the company, the organization that Baptist Grove has partnered with in the work that we're doing. These are the folks that sponsored our trip to Rwanda. Now, if you go to the next slide, this slide gives you a view of Rwanda, the country. World Vision began its work in Rwanda in response to the humanitarian crisis that was caused by the genocide. So the company's been around, the organization's been around since 1950. but it entered into Rwanda in 1994. During the first year that they were in Rwanda, World Vision provided emergency help to displaced people. They cared for unaccompanied children, and they helped people resettle as they returned home. Some of the areas that were focused on for intervention: education and child sponsorship, health and nutrition, water, sanitation and hygiene, and economic empowerment of households. Our trip to Rwanda was a vision trip. And you may be wondering, what is a vision trip? And I'm glad that you're wondering that, because I'm going to answer it for you. If we go to the next slide, a vision trip is where we have the opportunity to see the capabilities, the skills, and resources of a community in action, solving the problems that are faced by the members in that community. We had a chance to gain a deeper understanding of the work that's being done in Rwanda, and we gained an understanding of the need for continued investment and support of the work that still needs to be accomplished. Now, let me tell you what a vision trip is not. It's not a missions trip. It's not a work trip. It's not a vacation. And it's not volunteerism. So earlier when I mentioned we didn't see the gorillas and we didn't see the golden monkeys, because that's not the purpose of a vision trip. The purpose of the vision trip is for the partner, the advocate, to see how the resources are being used in the area where the resources are being provided. And that's what we had the chance to do. Now, you may be wondering, how do you prepare for a vision trip? Once again, I'm glad that you asked, or you're thinking that, because I'm going to tell you. If we go to the next slide, World Vision did a phenomenal job in helping to prepare us for our trip. We had several preparation calls where we talked about travel. They also provided educational materials, and the book that I have on the slide, I have the physical copy here in the MUF, so if you want to see it after the presentation is over, you can take a look at it. But in the materials, it tells you what to expect, how you are to prepare, how to stay healthy, cultural considerations, practical considerations, spiritual considerations, and then what actions do you need to take when you prepare to return home. Sometimes when you're traveling to other locations and you have a chance to see and experience what the people in those locations are living, when you come back home and you have a different life circumstance, it can be a challenge when you witness certain things going on at home. I'll share an example. It is extremely difficult for me now to see people waste water, especially water bottles with portions of water that remain, that may be poured out on the ground or thrown away or just left aside. Because of understanding the significance and the importance that water has in so many different communities. Some of the materials will help you prepare as you transition back in. If we go to the next slide, one of the things I've shared is when I travel, I recognize there are some people that may only see the world through my eyes. And so I don't make the assumption that people automatically understand what's entailed in actual travel. I'll share a quick little personal story. I have one grandparent that remains, and my grandparent that is still alive is my paternal grandmother. She's only really been in 3 states on the East Coast. And the likelihood is that she may never travel to any other states and definitely to any other countries. So what she knows of the world, a lot of it is what she hears or she sees from the experiences that I've had. And so one of the things that I think is important is to give people that visibility. I also think it's important for you as Baptist Grove family and friends to get more visibility into what we experienced when we were there. So for the travel, we had a long travel. We had several flights. We have a wonderful pastor who laughs a lot and is easy to get along with travel, and thank God that's the case, because total travel time of 19 hours can be a strain. Otherwise, if you don't have a good travel companion. That 19 hours is collective of the multiple flights that we took to actually get ultimately to Kigali in Rwanda, where we landed. As you can see, I've included some information about the visa application process. Every country is different from a visa process. For Rwanda, you actually have the ability to arrive in country, apply for your visa on site, and gain entry into the country. Unlike some other countries, you don't have to apply for a visa too far in advance. Now, we did have our visas before we landed, based on recommendations from our World Vision partners, but you have the ability to come and apply when you get in country. And of course, as I shared last week with Israel, make sure you take the appropriate measures to register yourself with the U.S. State Department before you leave to go to any country, quite honestly. If we go to the next slide, lodging in Rwanda. Where did we stay? So we stayed in two different locations. When we arrived, the first place that we stayed is at the very top, and it may look familiar to some of you. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie, a docudrama that was released in 2004 called Hotel Rwanda. It told the story of the genocide and specifically the safe harboring that took place for the people of Rwanda during that time in this hotel. This is the hotel where we stayed when we were in Kigali. The second hotel is where we spent the most of our time. If we go to the next slide, meals in Rwanda. As I shared last week, I never have a problem eating. I'm always going to eat well. I'm always going to find something I can have. I shared that some of you weren't here last week, but I'm a vegetarian, and so I typically can find something to eat in any country where I'm visiting. But the meals in Rwanda were good. Even for my travel mates that are not vegetarian and ate meat, there was chicken, there was goat that was available, and folks seemed to enjoy it and eat very well. So I just wanted to give you a view that we had pretty hearty meals. Beans and rice are staples, potatoes, of course your vegetables, whether it was changed out with a darker green leafy vegetable or more like a cabbage vegetable, but the meals were really good. Your pastor and I ate very well while we were in Rwanda. We were not hungry. Typically when we ate family style. And typically the family style eating was buffet when we were at the hotel. There were a few times where we went to locations where we were able to order more like a restaurant menu style where they bring the menu and we pick items, but typically it was buffet and you could pick and eat as much as you may have wanted. So now that you know some of the basics of the country and making sure that we were resting well and that we were well fed, let me give you a view into what was happening each day. So if we go to the next slide, our days were very full. On Monday the 24th, we actually left on Sunday, July 23rd. We finished service here. Of course, our 8 o'clock and our 10 o'clock service. Our first flight, we needed to be at the airport. I think we flew out at 3 o'clock Sunday afternoon. So when we arrived into Kigali, we got there Monday evening. It was later Monday evening. And so by the time we got to the hotel, we had dinner, and then we needed to get some rest. So Monday was really a travel day. Tuesday is when our actual activities began. Each day we started with breakfast and devotion. Again, breakfast was family style with our travel companions. Pastor talked a little bit about the devotion in his sermon. For our devotions, there was a word that was given, there was praise and worship that happened, and that was done on a daily basis before we left. We had a security briefing for that Monday. We had a chance to visit the Genocide Memorial. We debriefed periodically throughout the week. We always had a nice lunch. And then we left Kigali and we went to our next destination where we spent the majority of our time, Huye. And we had dinner at that hotel. By the time we arrived, it was about a 4.5 hour drive to get there. And then we were able to rest. On Wednesday, of course, we had the Chosen Party. And you saw some footage of the Chosen Party. Some of you may not, so you'll have a chance to see a little bit of that tonight as well. We did have an opportunity to have lunch with the other donors and the children that we were sponsoring and their families. So I had a chance to meet my sponsored child's mother. She joined us for lunch, and I had a chance to hang out and play soccer with him. Then we had downtime at the hotel, a dinner, and a debrief. On Thursday, again, breakfast and devotion. We visited a water pumping station, a water point, and a water tank on the top. We learned about the WASH impact. We visited a school and a church. We had lunch with local pastors. And then we had an opportunity to visit a technical school and then dinner. Friday, we were ready to head out. So we checked out of the hotel. We drove back to Kigali. We had a farewell lunch with the World Vision Rwanda senior leadership team, got to the airport, and then we were ready to return back to the U.S. Few slight travel delays, but we made it back safely. That was our schedule. So it was a full week. And again, if we remember the purpose of a vision trip, the vision trip is to give you exposure. And World Vision did a phenomenal job of giving us that exposure. If we go to the next slide, Tuesday the 25th, we had a chance to visit the Kigali Genocide Memorial, Remembrance and Learning. You know, Scripture talks about how God goes before us, and he prepares us. For those that were here last week, I talked about the trip to Israel, where I had an opportunity to participate in an archaeological dig. When I returned from Israel, about a week and a half later, I was headed to Rwanda. While I was in Israel, as some of you may know, during my archaeological dig, during that dig, we were digging, of course, for artifacts, but I also came across human remains. And in the process of digging, you're educated. So I became educated about how to identify human remains and how to read human bones. Now, for anybody that knows me, I am adverse to anything on anybody's body and struggle sometimes with my own. So digging in the dirt and finding remains was not something that was my cup of tea. And God wasn't surprised by that. God knows me very well. I didn't know that my trip in Israel and the exposure that I would receive to human remains would be preparation for my visit to the Kigali Genocide Memorial. Because inside of the memorial, there's the history of the Rwandan people, but there's also extensive artifacts and items that you can view of those people that lost their lives in the genocide, including human remains, the bones. And so having the chance to visit the memorial, very impactful. It was a very emotional day for many of us to be there and to see and to witness. However, I'm extremely grateful to God for the preparation that was provided in Israel for what I was going to encounter in Rwanda. The other benefit for that preparation is when I got into the room and I was able to see the human remains, I could read some of the bones because I had been taught in Israel how to do that. And it's very similar to learning how to read Hebrew and Greek, and then you open the Bible in Hebrew and Greek, and it's not something that someone's translated for you. You get to see it in its original context. It changes your understanding. So my understanding of what occurred was directly impacted by the previous experience I'd had just a week and a half prior when I was in Israel. The other way that God prepared me, as many of you know, I am in my last year of divinity school at Campbell University Divinity School. And in the spring of 2023, I took a class titled Religion and Violence that was taught by Dr. Caleb Oladipo. In that class, we talked about terrorism, but we also spent some time talking about the genocide in Rwanda. Now, the spring semester began in January. Pastor connected with the folks, I think around February for World Vision, and it was later into the semester that he approached me about the trip. I had no way of knowing in January, being in that class, that a few months later, I would plant my feet in the very place that I was studying and learning about. That also provided some level of preparation. Now, you may be wondering, why are you telling us this? Because the title of this session is Spiritual Lessons That We Learn in Rwanda. And one spiritual lesson that I walked away with, and I walked away with many, but one spiritual lesson I walked away with is that God really does go before and prepare the way for us. Because God really does know what we need and when we're going to need it. We are all uniquely made in God's image. And what I may need may be different than what you may need. And so it was just another opportunity for me to give God thanks for how God loves and cares for us. Because he made it so specific and so unique to my experience. I consider it like the wink of my Father. Just to remind me, I got you. So for somebody tonight, you might be in a situation where you're wondering, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know what it's going to be used for. I don't even know if God is hearing me. Trust and believe. God is doing it. God is preparing you for what's to come, and you can trust God. If we go to the next slide, you'll see here, of course, Pastor Akinbinu, the lady with the white, her name is Christine. She was actually our U.S.-based travel leader for the trip. They're listening to our museum memorial guide that's educating us. I'm going to share with you, I prayed about things, and I opted not to include any pictures associated with the genocide in tonight's presentation. There's more than ample information you can find online if you decide to Google it. And I have a very specific reason for not including it. The past is important. The Bible speaks to the importance of history and knowing your history. But what I experienced in Rwanda is a country under resurrection. And they're coming back. And if I'm going to give time to speak and to highlight and to talk, I'm going to talk about what I see now, what we're doing moving forward, versus spending the time on what may have happened in the past. And again, it's not to negate the past. I'm also very sensitive to understanding that God prepared me for what I was going to experience. I don't know how God has prepared you. And so I'm sensitive to the potential trauma that people may experience when they see graphic photos and things of that nature. So it is not to withhold information from you. The last piece, when we were there at the memorial, they actually discouraged taking any photos, that if you want to have photos, you would purchase from them, because they control the narrative of the story that's told about their history. And quite honestly, it's not my history. It's not my story to tell. I believe that God has called me to tell the story of hope, of resurrection, of love, and of a future that God has for us. And so, again, if you'd like to learn more about the genocide, I'm going to share 2 books that they recommended we check out, and you can always Google to get more information, okay? If we go to the next slide, this picture is from the lunch that we attended after we visited the Genocide Museum. Pastor talked about this in his sermon, and he talked specifically about love. And the two individuals that he spoke about are in the pictures that you see directly with Pastor Akinbinu. The woman's name is Alice. The man's name is Emmanuel. They both were a part of the genocide that took place in Rwanda. They shared their story with us at lunch, and you can see us at the lunch table. I don't know if you can see as closely, but the middle picture shows where we're sitting, and I'm kind of leaning forward. Directly across from me is Alice, and to my left, to my right, directly across from me is Emmanuel. And Alice shared her story of being a victim of the genocide. She showed us her scars. She told us the experience that she had. Pastor mentioned some of it in his sermon. I'll highlight a couple of things. Alice shared how she was married and she had 5 children, and her baby girl was probably about 9 months or so. And when the killing started, they had to flee because it was neighbors and friends that were charged to commit the murders. And so when she and her family fled, unfortunately, she was attacked to the point that her baby girl was taken from her arms and murdered in front of her. She said that her daughter was cut in half. And she witnessed this, and she was also attacked. She carried the visible scars from the attack. And she showed us. She showed us where the spear went through her arm, through her back. She showed us where she was cut. Some things she didn't have to show us because we could see. But she had a very different spirit about her. And as she's telling the story of how her first attack happened, and then she was able to make it to the swamp, and she lived in the swamp as a fish. She was attacked on somewhere around April the 7th, but she wasn't rescued until July, and she was attacked 3 different times and left for dead. But she survived. And as she's talking about her attack, I remember I'm looking at Emmanuel, and I'm thinking to myself, he looks familiar. This man looks very familiar to me. So remember when I was saying how God goes before you and prepares you? That class that I took? One of the things that we did in that class when we were studying the genocide in Rwanda, we watched a video. And in the video, there were stories told of people that experienced the genocide. Emmanuel was one of the men in the video. And it wasn't until Alice started telling her story that it was brought back to my memory. I know who you are. Now, I don't necessarily know that everyone else at the table who was visiting like me knew who Emmanuel was or potentially what was done, but I knew. And I'm sitting across from him. And I'm listening to Alice, who is this beautiful reflection of who Christ is. And I'm hearing scripture in my head where Jesus says, Father, forgive them because they know not what they do. And Alice is talking about the resources she received from World Vision to help her get to the place that she could forgive the individual that did this to her. And the individual that did this to her is the person that's sitting at the table that she walked in with that I'm looking at, Emmanuel. And there was a moment that I lowered my head at the table and I was praying because I was angry. I was so angry. I was so angry at Emmanuel. And as I'm praying, because I'm like, Lord, I need your help right now. He's done nothing to me. She's forgiven him, but I have so much anger towards him. And I heard God speak to me. The anger was released. God honored me. The anger was released. I was able to go through the rest of the lunch. And I was able to hear his story. And I learned that he was also a victim. And he showed us the bullet wounds where he was shot and forced to commit the acts that he did. He and everyone else that participated. And how some people tried to flee. And I was convicted in the feelings that I had towards him. And I remember sitting and thinking, how would I respond? If it were me, how would I respond? I would hope that I would respond in the way that God desires me to respond. But I had an honest moment before the Lord, and I said, I genuinely don't know. And I said, well, Lord, I think there's some more hard work that you need to do with me, because you're showing me I'm not where I need to be. I'm not where I used to be, but I'm not where I need to be. And that might be somebody here tonight, whether in-house or online. There may be some hard work that God wants to do with you. And it's okay to be vulnerable before the Lord. It's okay to take it directly to the Lord. We have emotions. We're human. Jesus understands. He had emotions too when he walked on this earth. It's the direction that we take those emotions that's most important. We had a great lunch. You heard Pastor preach the sermon. I'm not here to preach a sermon, but we had a great lunch. It was a transformational experience sitting at that table. And the thing that I walked away with, Alice forgave the murder of her daughter and the direct infliction that she felt. What am I holding on to that's not even 5% of that I need to let go of? She was a great role model for many of us. If we go to the next slide. Thank you. These are the two resources that were mentioned by our guide in the memorial. If you're interested in learning more, I would encourage you to check these resources out. I'm sure you can find them on Amazon or order them through another book supplier if you desire to do so. If we go to the next slide, on Wednesday the 26th, this was the chosen party. And some of you may have seen the video of the chosen party. Some of you may not. It may be your first time joining us, or maybe you came to Baptist Grove after we had our reveal event and the video, you didn't get a chance to see it. So I'm going to share a portion of it with you tonight. So if we can go to the chosen video. It's a great opportunity and a great witness to see people that have the opportunity to choose. Each of those children had the chance to choose. So for those of you that are sponsors, thank you for your sponsorship. For those of you that may not have sponsored, If you decide that you want to sponsor, there's still opportunity for that. Your child may not be a part of the village that we visited, but there's still opportunity for you to sponsor because there's still children that need sponsorship. If we go to the next slide, Thursday, the 27th. This is the day that we visited the water pumping station, a water point, a water tank on top, Wash Impact. We had lunch with pastors, and we visited the technical school. In this picture, can we go back to the previous picture? Thank you. In this picture, the lady that you see with the glasses, her name is Mary. She actually was our World Vision Rwanda lead for the trip. The gentleman that's beside her, he goes by the name Afro. He works with World Vision Rwanda. The gentleman in the purple is actually the principal at the school where we visited, and the gentleman in the blazer is the pastor at the church that's directly beside the school. If we go to the next slide, our morning started off with us visiting the mayor's office. So in the picture at the very top, that's Pastor Akinbinu and I with the mayor of Simbi, and you can see our travel mates and I, we are in the meeting location with the mayor. We went to the mayor's office to learn more about the status of things in Simbi, the impact World Vision is having, and where there are future opportunities. The person that actually was very instrumental in coordinating this trip, you're going to hear more about him a little later. His name is Pastor Terry, and he is the pastor of Bayview Church out in San Diego, California. He had traveled to Rwanda previously and felt very passionate that he wanted to bring people back that looked like the kids in Rwanda, to support the kids in Rwanda, and that's exactly what he did. So this was the first all-black trip of people of African American and African descent that traveled to Rwanda with World Vision. After we finished at the mayor's office, now we can go to the next slide. We visited the school, and the school is a really, really nice school. I personally was really impressed in what I saw with the school, and I've included a couple things here that become very important as we consider this school. The picture that says inclusive education is our shield. Being inclusive is extremely important. And one of the things that impressed me the most of this school being inclusive is the accommodations that are made for people that are not able-bodied. So you can see the sign for the wheelchair. You can see the sign language sign for ASL. And I highlight these things because not all schools offer this. And we recognize that some of the offerings of this school are directly related to the partnership they have with World Vision. Now, I'm going to share something with you all. When we were in Rwanda, and I shared this with Pastor Akinbinu, sometimes my processing doesn't happen as quickly as it needs to. And I remember we were riding down the street, and I was like, you know, Pastor, I was like, it just clicked. He's like, what? I was like, it just clicked. I've been wondering, why am I seeing so many people in wheelchairs and on crutches? And then we were at the school, and they had these accommodations. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, it just clicked. I just realized and remembered the genocide that took place. The accommodations are needed. The genocide happened in 1994. I graduated from high school in 1994. The people that we were interacting with are people that were either children or adolescents, teens, young adults that survived the genocide. Let that sink in for a moment. It wasn't that long ago. Because in my mind, it wasn't long ago. I was in high school, at least when I talk with my friends from high school. It wasn't long ago. It wasn't that long ago. If we go to the next slide. These are just some highlights at the school. We were greeted by the children when we arrived at the school. They were singing and they were dancing. We felt very special when we arrived. They did a great job. The hospitality in Rwanda, it's on another level. Everywhere we went, the hospitality was beyond 5-star. And it was just a really, really great experience. And this is Pastor Akinbinu with the principal. The suitcase that's beside him is one of 2 suitcases that we took with items from Baptist Grove. That suitcase had, it was full of school supplies. And there was another suitcase that had a lot of soccer balls in it. And so we were able to give practical things that the students could utilize, pencils, pencil sharpeners, different types of supplies. It was a lot of supplies that were in the suitcase, and they were extremely appreciative of those items. If we go to the next slide, one of the things that I mentioned when I was talking about World Vision is the term WASH. One of the global focuses of World Mission is water, sanitation, and hygiene. Water, sanitation, and hygiene become very important. Clean water helps with sanitation, and it helps with good hygiene. And so the picture that you see, the first picture with the student standing by the wall, is actually a hand washing station. And the pictures that are on the hand washing station give instructions for the students to teach them how to properly wash their hands. The picture to the far side is a picture of the well that's at the school. That was provided by World Vision. So the kids at the school are able to get clean water. Now, before the well was there, how did they get water? Well, we learned that many students, in the mornings, they leave their home and they can walk anywhere for up to an hour, hour and a half with jerry cans to go fill them with water. Water for their families and water to take to school. Now, depending upon how far a child may have to walk, it may impact what time they arrive at school or even if they're able to go. They're also placed at risk when they go to get water. We heard a story about one group that went on a water walk, and when they got to the water, one of the pastors was asking, well, who's that group of men over there? And one of the native Rwandan people with them shared, well, unfortunately, human trafficking is real. And sometimes children go to get water and they don't come back home. So parents are very concerned when their children have to walk a long way. Also, those jerry cans are really heavy. They can fill with water 30, 40 pounds, and they're carrying multiple cans. Water in the morning, water in the evening. So by having a well at this school, they get clean water and they're able to be there to have their educational opportunities presented to them. The picture in the middle, you may not be able to see the writing on that picture. This was something that I actually found, it just really touched my heart. It's the menstrual hygiene management room for girls. This is a room where girls are able to go once they have their menstrual cycle, where they can receive the products that they need. They can receive education from the teacher that oversees that room. There's a shower, there's a restroom, and there's a bed. And whenever a young girl is on her menstrual cycle, she has the opportunity to use this room. This room is extremely beneficial because in some areas, when girls don't have the products that they need, it means they can't go to school. They actually have to go out to the bush, and they remain in the bush until their cycle is over. That puts them at risk. So now their safety is at risk because they're out. They can't go to school until they actually have completed their menstrual cycle, and then they can return. So there's a lapse in education. While we were there, they were very, very gracious in allowing a very brave young lady to share her testimony with us and the impact the menstrual room is having for her. So I want to share that testimony with you now.
Her name is Renata. We're grateful to World Vision for giving us this girls' room. Yeah, it helps us when we are on our periods during the time of school. We have a room and a place place to go to.
kandi tubona ko ibikoresho byose twabasha kwifashisha.
Yes, this room is well equipped with all the supplies that we need in that time.
Turashimira rero World Vision kuba yaratugejeje iki cyumba.
Yeah, so we're grateful for that. Mbere yuko mukibona byari bimeze bite mwasibaga amasomo.
Mbere yuko kino cyumba cya World Vision kitaraza byabagaho imbogamizi mu gihe umwana w'umukobwa yaba yagiye mu mihango bikaba ngombwa ko asiba ishuri kubera nta bikoresho.
Okay, so she's saying that before they had this room, some of the girls would not have any supplies to use on their period, so they would miss classes, and so to miss 3 days in a month, and so 12 days in a term, that was a lot of days of missing school and a lot of content that they would miss out on. So they're grateful that they don't have to miss that anymore. They can attend just like any other person.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Okay.
Thank
We're
you.
gonna hear from Pauline.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renata.
Thank you.
Nitwa
Marakose.
nkaba ndi umurezi
You gonna wear it out.
Tunda eyari abashinzwe gukurikirana abana b'abakobwa.
So she is a guardian here and especially in charge of the ladies, of the girls.
Turashima rero kuko byaradufashije bituma abana biga neza. Nugize imbogamizi arafashwa kuko ibikoresho birahari bihagije.
So it has helped girls, especially girls in that age, to study well, which was not the situation before. But now they can attend school regularly with no challenge, with no hindrance.
Byarafashije cyane rero turabishima kuko bituma abana b'abakobwa biga neza. Hanyuma tukanabashishikariza n'uburyo bageze mu rugo igihe habaye inama z'ababyeyi tukabashishikariza mu buryo bwo gukomeza kugira isuku. N'uwo tubona tugomba gufasha bamujyana mu rugo nawe tukabumuha.
So she's saying that them as guardians are here to support the children because sometimes they don't know how to use the supplies, what to do.
Right.
And so they're there to guide them through the process.
Yes.
And if a child is not feeling well to the point that they can't continue studying that very day, they arrange a way to get them home so they can rest. And if they're not feeling well at the moment, they can give them a chai.
Ibikoresho niba tubona iwabo hari imbogamizi uko ashobora kubona context cyangwa se tubasha.
Yeah. So they give them supplies. Some of the kids would have cramps so they can rest a little bit. Or if they need like a warm drink, tea or something, whatever can help them feel better to continue their studies.
Wow. That's
So
beautiful.
it has been a blessing.
So good.
And she was saying that
As Aria said, that the water point, and even for pads, some families can't afford to buy pads for the kids. So what is happening? Most of the time, the school do provide a few pads to such families.
That's awesome.
to use at home as well.
Wow, that's awesome.
turashima rero muri rusange turashimira muri rusange ko byagize umumaro.
Abasore mubagira inama mu buzima bw'imyororokere.
Tugira amakarabo tubasha kubaganirizamo ku buryo mu mpande zombi abakobwa n'abahungu ku buryo bw'imyororokere.
Okay, so she's saying that this is also an opportunity to talk to the girls about their reproductive health because they're in that time, and so they also stand in that place to like educate them on their body and how it's changing and how they can make good decisions regarding their health, because there's so much teen pregnancies going on, and so they're in that way they educate them on that. And she's saying that they've established clubs for both boys, and a boys club and a girls club, to educate them on their bodies and how that can affect their lives, how they handle themselves.
Yes, so good. Thank you.
So saying Thank you. I think something maybe I can emphasize what he was saying before. Even in the Rwandan culture, when a girl would be on their period, they would. It was like almost like a. There would be, because there were no pads, so they go in the bush for like the entire time.
Wow.
They'll hide away from society,
Yeah.
away from everybody.
Yeah.
And so, so that connects to how the situation was, not having sanitary pads for to use in that time. There was no, point coming to school.
Right.
So they would hide there and all that. So this has brought back their dignity.
Yes. Yes.
And the fact that they can use it, in the daylight, there's no shame.
Right.
Being a
Exactly.
girl, there's no
Exactly.
shame, for that. So, yeah.
That's beautiful.
Okay. The narrator of that was given all the accolades was our leader, Christine. So, but again, you see how resources are being utilized. So when you hear that the money, for those of you that are sponsors, when you hear that the money is supporting your child and the community your child is a part of, it's going to support efforts like this. This is how the money is being utilized. And for those of us that are in the room that can relate to this young girl and some of the experiences she may have felt or is still feeling, we can understand the importance of having that space and having access to those things. This slide actually shows you pictures of the church that's next door to the school that we visited. Again, the pastor is in the gray suit. The green doors are the entry into the church. And then, as you can see, the white chairs that are there for the congregation to use whenever they have their worship services. But the picture above is a picture of the sign that is placed directly above the water station at the church. You may recall that Pastor Akinbinu talked about the Rwandan government required churches to have hand stations at their churches for the church to reopen during COVID, and that's so that people could wash their hands. This is the hand station that was placed at the church, and World Vision helped put that hand washing station there so that the people were able to utilize this church. I believe the pastor shared that his church was one of the first churches that reopened in Rwanda during the COVID time period, and they serviced the community. If we go to the next slide, this is the technical school that we visited. It's the TVET school and the youth furniture business. So for those that are here in the MUF, I don't know if we can direct the camera over, but there's a table that has this globe sitting on it. This is one of the tables that the students at the school made. They gave us all a table. Unfortunately, as y'all know, Pastor Akinbinu's luggage was lost. His table was in his suitcase. So this is the table that at least I was able to bring back that the students made. So as you can see, it's a good quality table, and they're putting those skills to use. On that table, after the session is over, you can go and look. There's also a keychain that they made that you can see as well. If we go to the next slide, these are some of the students at the school. They have the option to do construction work. They also have the option to work in carpentry, and there's also an option for them to work with like sewing materials. And so it was a beautiful thing to see because there were some ladies that were there, they were sewing and they had their babies with them. This school is purposefully set aside for students that have not completed secondary school. For whatever reason, they have another option so that they can gain skills, and those skills can allow them to enter the workforce. And again, World Vision is helping to sponsor the needs here as well. If we go to the next slide, that's your pastor's missing stool that he's sitting on. At least we have a picture that he can have. This is one of the students in the middle that shared his testimony of how he stopped school and he had gotten connected to the wrong people, but he was able to start back to school and regained his hope. And then the last picture, you can see one of our travel companions. This is Pastor Lance. He's actually taken a chance to work with some of the carpentry, and I think it was a little bit harder than he thought it was going to be, especially as he's receiving directions from the student that's there. If we go to the next slide, We're now on Friday, July the 28th. This is the day that we are preparing to leave and return back to Kigali so that we can prepare to depart to the U.S. This is the day we also have the opportunity to have lunch with the senior leadership team of World Vision Rwanda. Christine is the lady that's in the black and cream shirt, and then the director of the World Vision Rwanda office is standing next to her. And so she was the host of our lunch. If we go to the next slide, she was very gracious in gifting us. And as you can see, the shirt that I have on in that picture is the shirt that I have on tonight, because it was also a gift from the World Vision Rwanda team. And just again, the hospitality was unquestionable. It was pretty awesome. Next slide. So, where did we see God? The purpose of this session is to talk about scriptural lessons that we saw in Rwanda, and there were many of them. The first lesson is on love. So if we go to the next slide. 1 Corinthians 13:7, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. This is Alice and Emmanuel. Our next slide. We saw God with selflessness, Philippians 2:4. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Now, this is 3 different representations from Baptist Grove congregation that participated in Chosen. There are so many more. I think we're over like 270 members across the congregation. And Mr. Avery, I know you're sitting here tonight. I took the liberty of putting your picture up there. But the selflessness of the members of Baptist Grove, and even people that aren't members of Baptist Grove but join our services on Sunday virtually outside of the Triangle area, that join in and also sponsor children. Next slide. We also saw God in choice. 1 Peter 2:9 tells us, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light, the ability for the children to choose. Choice is not something that they have the opportunity to experience. World Vision provides them with choice. The next slide. I'm going to call this one Holy Curiosity. Deuteronomy 29:29. The secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things that are revealed belong to us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law. That's Alex in the World Vision vest. And you may recall in Pastor Akinbinu's sermon, Alex is the man that created the design for the water system, and he came back to his hometown in Rwanda to implement it. And what they're looking at is the clean water in that well that's being dispersed to other areas within that community who also have the ability to receive clean water. Now, I didn't want to show y'all the picture of your pastor standing on top of the well because I wouldn't want y'all thinking that I wasn't trying to do a good job of also looking out and taking care of him while we were there. If we go to the next slide. We saw joy, Psalm 16:11. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is a fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. Next slide. We saw resilience, Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. This sign is one of many signs that was at the school that we visited. Next slide. We saw opportunity, Ephesians 5:15 through 17. Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise but as wise, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. Next slide. Tenacity. 2 Chronicles 15:7. But you take courage. Do not let your hands be weak, for your work shall be rewarded. Next slide, humility. These are two of the drivers that we had. The driver that's standing directly next to me with the shades clipped on his shirt, that was our driver we were with the majority of the time. With all humility and gentleness, with patience, bearing with one another in love. He bared with us in love while we were in his vehicle. We had a lot of fun, y'all, and he genuinely bared with us in love. Next slide. Hope. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. This might be one of the Baptist Grove soccer balls. I don't know. Everybody brought soccer balls, and the kids love the soccer balls. I will tell you, this was actually someone out in the community. So we also visited out in the community, and we did give items to the people in the community as well that extended beyond us visiting the school. Next slide. Fellowship. Proverbs 27:17. Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. Each of these gentlemen are pastors. 4 of them are the senior pastors at their church. Next slide. Leadership. Mark 9:35. And he sat down and called the 12, and he said to them, if anyone would be first, he must be last of all and servant of all. Box number 1, the lady in the red, her name is Summer. Again, Afro's in the middle, and Christine's on the end in pink. This is our World Vision team. Picture number 2, the lady with me is Mary. She was interpreting in the video that you just saw, the testimonial. She's World Vision Rwanda. Box number 3 at the very top, that is the vice mayor of Simbi in the yellow between Pastor Akinbinu and I. At the very bottom, World Vision Rwanda, the World Vision Rwandan director. And then the 5th box, the guy between Pastor Akinbinu and I, is the mayor of Simbi. These are the levels of leadership that we had the chance to interact with while we were there. And they were all actively involved within the communities that we visited. Next, protection. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened and do not be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua 1, verse 9. And then lastly, this experience was Rwandaful. And that is to quote Pastor Lance, one of my travel mates, just so that you all know who our travel mates were. The gentleman in the orange shirt at the very top is Pastor Terry. His wife is Monique. Monique is standing beside me in the green shirt with the braids. Pastor Terry is the senior pastor at Bayview Church in San Diego, California. He's the person that coordinated the trip. The guy directly beside him in the Live and to Serve shirt needs no introduction. The one behind him in the Better Together shirt, that is Bishop Juwan Hilton from Bristol Baptist Church in Compton, California. Sitting directly below me, again, that's Christine Hayworth. She's with World Vision US. Beside her is Summer Jackson. She's with World Vision US. Christine is in California. Summer is in Mississippi. Sitting on the ground is Pastor Lance Riley. He's the senior pastor of the Anointed Place in Long Beach, California. If we go back up to the top, if you're looking directly beside me, again, that's Monique. Beside Monique is Mary. Mary was our translator in the video, and she's our World Vision Rwanda lead. Beside Mary it is Pastor Michael and Sister Eva Oakley. They're actually at Watts Chapel Baptist Church here in Raleigh. They attended the trip on behalf of Pastor Harry White. This was the travel team. The only person that's not pictured here is the person that was handling the media recording. And so he's taking the pictures a lot. You didn't have a chance to see him. He was in one of the pictures, but he's not included here. This is the group that we had the chance to experience this transformational moment in time in this season. And we had a phenomenal trip and a great experience. And on behalf of Pastor Akinbinu and myself, I want to say thank you, Baptist Grove, for your prayers, for the support that y'all extended. It was definitely felt and appreciated. And for tonight, I do have a few things on display. Again, the materials that were provided by World Vision, if you want to see what they used to prepare us. Also, some materials that I've used to prepare for other travels. And then in the enclosed glass case, you'll see some other things that I've preserved as memorabilia items from the trip. I am going to open it up now to see if we have any questions. I don't know, TJ, if we can see if we have any questions online, and I'll see if we have any questions here in the room. There's a question. We're going to need to use the mics tonight, so I think it's Mr. Joe, and then we'll go to Ashley.
Is that what time is monsoon season originate over there?
So I think you might have missed it, Mr. Joe. I did a slide on the climate. Let me go back to it so I can make sure I'm giving you an accurate response. So the rainy season in Rwanda is March to May. That's the heaviest rains. And then it's October to mid-December.
And also, are most people in that particular area vegetarians?
I don't know the percentage of vegetarians or non-vegetarians. I mean, there were meat options that were available. And I don't recall a lot of folks that I was interacting with. What I will say is I don't think meat is something that's eaten a lot. It's really more of like a special cuisine, especially bringing it out for guests. Okay. I think Ashley had a question in the back.
Were you able to get a feel culturally of like what sorts of opportunities might be available for girls and women, and generally speaking, like what is their treatment like in Rwanda?
Treatment of girls and women. First, some of the research that I did leading up to, and even some of the materials World Vision provided, it is an area that is going to be more egalitarian in many instances, and there is equality between men and women. Now, that may differ in the church for certain denominations, and that isn't specific to Rwanda, that just may be more denominational specific. But the woman that I'll highlight is the director of the World Vision Rwanda office. She runs the entire Rwanda office. So there's definitely a level of respect and opportunity for women to be in, I would say, leadership positions from what I witnessed. And then seeing Mary, who was leading in the World Vision Rwanda space for our trip, seeing the teacher at the school that oversaw the girls' menstrual room. She was dedicated to that room, but she had other functions as well. So I would say, I didn't see anything that caused any great concern for girls and women in the areas where we went. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Good evening, Mrs. Katrina. I have a question. So the village where our children come from, with us now partnering with World Vision, are they going to bring water to our kids? My Oliver needs water.
So, again, I don't work for World Vision. It's probably more appropriate for me to reach out to our World Vision contacts to inquire what specifically they're doing within the community. What I will say is I'll go back to what I mentioned before. Their global focus is WASH. So water is one of their primary focuses within the community to make sure that water is made available. But I will take that question and I will get an accurate answer from the folks that work with World Vision and get back to you. You're welcome. And actually, let me just say this. I think I might have a World Vision partner online tonight. If you are out there, Christine, and if you have an answer for the question about the water, feel free to text me, and I'll give her a real-time update if you're out there. And if you're not, it's okay. I'll follow up.
Yeah. In their schools, do they have grade levels equal to what we, like, similar to what we have? If they do, what's the highest grade level they attend? And what's the possibility of them going to college? As we know it, I'm sure after they graduate, do they go off to, what do they do?
So there's primary school and there's secondary school. So I can't say if there's truly an equivalent to first, second, third grade, but primary school, I would say, is probably more equivalent to our elementary school. And then secondary school is probably going to be more equivalent to what the latter part of middle school and high school. And there are opportunities for students to go to university. Now, a lot of that is dependent upon probably academic performance and financial capabilities of the family. One of the things that I did learn when I was there, the Rwandan government has a requirement that in order for children to go to school, they must wear shoes. So if you notice the picture of the students, they all had shoes on. Whereas in some other pictures you may see, there are certain kids that may not have shoes on. So I know that some of the funding that you sent, some of the portions of the funds that you're giving, if you're sponsoring a child, is probably going towards shoes in the event they need them. And I will tell you, when I had lunch with my sponsored son's mother, and I asked her, well, what is he in need of? She said, shoes. He's 4. His foot is growing. Keep him in shoes so he can stay in school. I hope that answers your question. Okay. I'll do a check real quick. Do we have any questions we need to take online? Okay. Here in-house.
Minister Katrina, I was looking at their shoes. They don't wear the type of shoes that we wear. So if we wanted to send shoes to our child, like they say you can, so how would you know what type of shoe to get them if they don't look like what we have?
So that's a good question. So I'm not suggesting that you buy or send shoes. If you're sponsoring a child, you should have received some level of communication from World Vision. And the World Vision folks can give you guidance on what may be most appropriate. Typically, I think there's opportunities for you to do an additional donation if you want, and they'll purchase things that not only support your child, but other children in the community. I don't know if you have the ability to request how those funds are directed. If you decide you want to send more money and say, I'd like to have the money dedicated towards shoes or something of that nature. I was asking to try to get an idea, and also I'm just thinking about if the Lord ever makes a provision for me to go back, if I was going to bring something, what would I bring? I hope that answers your question. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, last week I had giveaways, and so I decided I would do it again this week. Unfortunately, for those online, I don't have any giveaways for you, but I do have giveaways for the folks in-house. And so not to tempt you and make you feel bad because you're not physically here, understanding some of you can't be because you're outside of the Triangle area, I'm going to go ahead and say good night to you. Thank you for joining us. If you do have questions, feel free to email us at life@baptistgrovechurch.org, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. If you'd like to send me an email directly, my email address is D as in David, O-M. It represents Director of Ministries at baptistgrovechurch.org, D-O-M at baptistgrovechurch.org. And hopefully you'll be able to join us next week. Next week is the final session in this series, and we're going to focus on Kenya. And the trip to Kenya was an immersion trip and also missions work that was done. So good night to BGC Online. Hope to see you Sunday in worship. Okay, so how many people do I have in here 18 and younger? Oh, Just you by yourself tonight. Come on up. So I believe that planting seeds are extremely important. The Bible talks about the importance of planting seeds. And so you were here last week with Israel. What'd you get last week? Coin and an artifact. So you got currency and an artifact. So this week I have something for you, because I know you could be anywhere right now, but you chose to be here, and I'm appreciative. So the first thing I have for you is a bracelet from Rwanda. It's in the colors of the flag. Good. And the next thing I have for you, so I've shared this before. I grew up in very, very humble beginnings. Very humble beginnings. And while I did a little travel, I didn't get to travel a lot of places, and I never went out of the country. But I knew a lot about a lot of different places because we only had 3 channels on the TV, and I had to read a lot because my brother controlled the dial. And so God's been gracious to me because all the places that I spent a lot of time reading about, He's allowed me to travel there. And I had a chance to see the things that I've read about. Now, here's the thing. I don't know what God has for you, but you were here last week and you were here this week. So that lets me know that there's something that you're receiving that's a seed. And a seed is planted, but it has to grow. Now, 13, right? All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I always bring stuff back. And I have extra currency.